Hello again. Welcome back to another edition of the Wiccan Conservative. I am here to bring you the up and coming news for what's going on as far as our country is concerned. It's been a while. I went up to North Carolina and got to take part in a rally in Raleigh. They were doing a redress of grievances. I got to see the Hayes brothers speak, which was kind of exciting for me. I really like those guys, watching their videos and the content that they put out. So it was kind of an exciting feeling for me to go up and get to shake their hand and say thanks for everything that you guys do for your community and getting the word out there. It inspired me to do the same. So with that being said, I came home and rested and went right back into what happened while I was gone. So I've been watching different news articles that have come onto the circuit, different personalities on YouTube that what they're talking about, and I wanted to bring back a little bit of, I guess, insight to the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez deal. I know that it was kind of a flash in the pan whenever it first came out, and everybody was talking about it, and then everybody stopped talking about it. And what I do is I get updates from, I think it's ballotpedia.org and govtrack.us and Judicial Watch and things to that effect. So I get little highlights and snippets of what's going down the pike as far as legislation being passed. And when I came across some funny looking bills this week, I went kind of down a bunny hole and decided that I was going to try to make heads or tails out of what otherwise seemed like useless or kind of fly-by-night legislation bills that were being proposed to Congress. So the first one that popped up, I'll get right into it, was the H.R. 1326 on February 22nd. And the act was proposed to provide for the preservation of America's outdoor heritage and enhance recreation opportunities on federal land and for other purposes. When you go to govtrack.us, you will see that the bill is not readable. There's no text to it. I believe that has something to do with the fact that it hasn't officially been proposed, so to speak. It got proposed to a bunch of House committees, the House Committee of Agriculture, Appropriations, the Judiciary Committee, Natural Resources, and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So I'm not exactly sure what the text is, but just the title kind of struck me as okay. Well, I've heard this before, coming out of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's first green bill is the desire to make natural lands more available to the public, as if they were for some reason not available to the public as they stand already. But it pricked my ears a bit. So when I went to govtrack.us, you can look at all the bills that are on the table. Another bill that caught my eye was on February 12th was the S47 Act of Natural Resources Management. So when you open up this bill, it is rather large, and it pertains to a lot of land exchanges and conveyances. So Section 1 is the short title in the table of contents. Section 2 gives the definition of secretary in regards to the bill. And the rest of the bill is laid out in a tactical sense, where you can go in and see all the different land exchanges of quite a few years past. I didn't happen to see any that were new acquisitions so much as they were shifting land around. So I spent quite a few hours hunting down different land acquisitions and different shifts of federal property, because you can go on and it is a bunny trail. But you can go down and you can see all the different ways that the private sector made deals with the federal government to take back portions of land, cut off public access to other portions of land, reopen public access in some portions of land. It's all very interesting to kind of go down. There's a instance in HR 154 that returns 172.8 acres to Tucson, Arizona. We'll get into why that's all important later on. But it was interesting. So at first, I'm thinking in my head, well, that's absolutely fine. I know that we have an issue with the federal government wanting to take our personal property land already, but now we're talking about reissuing and redistricting and in some cases, preserving the natural land, or at least that's what the bill states, is that it's preserving this natural land and that it's shifting around, kind of given to you in this is going to benefit you sort of way. So at this point, I'm still I've got my guard up, and I want to understand why we're shifting around all this money and all this land. Do we want to recognize this much land ownership by the government? Do we want to, who's technically the land being returned to? I know in Tucson it was stated that it was returned back to the state. But then you get into how many people are actually tracking this type of legislation. And typically I don't see a whole lot of bills that get huge numbers of following, unless it's something that's absolutely mainstream. I'm just scrolling through GovTrack right now, and the Natural Resource Management Act is being tracked by 71 users. Now that pales into comparison to the impeaching Donald Trump. That's being tracked by 127 users. But that should give you an idea as to how many people are using this website and what types of things they're tracking on the website. That's just a tip of the iceberg, because you can actually pull up on February 7th the HR 109, which is the recognizing the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal bill, which was, I'm assuming, the official backed bill of the Green New Deal that AOC put onto the table. And it's kind of funny because, like I said, we're going to put the first two acts to the side at the moment, and we're going to kind of unpack the Green New Deal as it sits on the actual slat for the Senate to take into consideration. I've heard a couple people state that, it's not really a bill, it's not really an act, it's just a recognition of the federal government to push the country in a way of creating renewable, clean energy resources, which would be fine if that's exactly what the bill said. But anybody that saw the original report of the bill was absolutely appalled by the FAQ section, and was also appalled by the many different references that she made to the socialistic qualities of what the federal government should be responsible for when it comes to general welfare of the public. And of course, that bill was backtracked, and she stated that it was not ready, or it was a first draft, or there was quite a few different excuses as to why she said that particular piece of legislation wasn't ready. When the American people looked at it, we knew that it wasn't ready. We knew that it didn't really follow anything that would qualify it to be, I know that this isn't a word, but enacted or enactful, the process of being enacted. But, quite honestly, at that point, how does that even escape your attention? How does it hit the mainstream the way that it did, to the point where you have to make up that the right-winger conservatives had doctored this piece of legislation that you just obviously you'd put your hopes and dreams into, and really let your political mask slip when you realized that you were supposed to be bipartisan. You're supposed to care about even fiscal conservatism, and that's not fiscal conservatism at any stretch of the imagination, or even possible to be defended as such. So going into the actual name of this resolution 109, recognizing the duty of the federal government, that right there, just anybody that's a constitutionalist will read that and be completely turned off immediately. Recognizing the duty of the federal government. We recognize the duty of the federal government in the Constitution. Yes, the Constitution states that the federal government is responsible for the general welfare of the public, but general is a general term. We aren't talking about swooping in and ensuring the safety. When you say you're concerned with the general welfare of somebody, you hope that they're doing good. You're going to help out when you can, but you're not going to take their family into your house and provide for them and their children for the rest of their lives so that they don't have to worry about anything. And that's where I think we get a lot of that confused. Yes, we're concerned with the general welfare, but we are not ensuring the welfare of anybody. So that, I take issue with that name off top. And then it says to create a Green New Deal. So in essence, you're basically telling me, before I even get into this bill, this isn't exactly the way you want to go about doing it, because you could create a Green New Deal at a later time that really specifies what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. This is just a general outlay. I really, like I said, I wanted to go to school to be an English major. I wanted to write. I wanted to teach writing. I took a lot of creative writing classes. Unfortunately, I do not agree with the school system, so I did not pursue a degree. But when we're talking about words and how we use them, this is something that I get, even my kids get mad at me for getting on them, for using the right words in the right context. The words themselves are almost as important as the context. Obviously, context is almost everything. You have to put things in a context. And when just reading the title of the bill, I'm already rubbed the wrong way. And I know a lot of you are as well. So the resolution of the bill is to recognize the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal. So basically, they made one point, but they made it twice. So they told you the name of the bill, and then the resolution, the very first thing that they tell you in the bill is they reiterate what they said already. So I'm already annoyed. Going into the actual bill, let me hop over here. So going into the actual bill, after they tell you the resolution, it says that, there's this report, special report on global warming. It's called the Special Report on Global Warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the entire premise of the actual report is data centric. My first issue with the report is it's literally titled that this is pretty much a report geared towards policy makers. So in my opinion, that comes with a biased agenda already. You know that the audience that you're speaking to are the ones who are going to recreate policies to enact the findings of your data. Excuse me if my nose is a little bit stuffy. So you're talking about First off, a party that was created to find data to back policy. It is pretty much what you're telling me. Then when you open the report, it's a whole nother can of worms. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm a highly educated person, but I consider myself pretty smart. And the fact that I opened this report and it's just repetitive jargon that consistently doesn't do anything but repeat itself. I really focused in on chapter 2 of the report. It's called Mitigation Pathways Compatible with 1.5 degrees Celsius in the Context of Sustainable Development. It's 82 pages long, first off. So as I'm not going to sit here and say that I sat and read all 82 pages because, like I said, it was very redundant to me. It made the same point over and over again, and then they shoved charts and graphs in your face and analyzed this data and then attempted to explain this data based upon, other areas in time where they saw a spike in the data. So I think that the major time frame that they were looking at was 2010 to 2014 as being the offending years for the U.S., but then they were going back like 150 years and doing, evidence research or evidence-based research where they were taking today's carbon emission levels and comparing it with 150 years ago carbon emission levels and certain things that were happening as far as the Industrial Revolution and increase in population and yada, yada, yada. So the report is still available. If you can grasp the context online, you can go to the govtrack.us, and if you give me 1 second here, I'll be able to tell you the Green New Deal report is on it's a website. It's rather long, but go ahead and you can look up the it's www.ipcc.ch, and then there's / to get to what you need to get to. But you should be able to find it whether you go to Alexandria's bill or proposal on GovTrack, or if you go to the ICC website. Like I said, it's something that I think you have to be a quantum physicist or a environmental scientist to actually grasp the content. But I didn't stop there. I had to go to a website called science.org.au, and it really gave me a pretty good explanation. And what they are is that they're actually the Australian Academy of Science people. So, of course, I trust my government. I trust sorry, that's my doggy. I trust my NASA scientists and people that really want to do the research and the climate change here. And I did go to their websites, but it was like being in an echo chamber, sort of. They all referenced the same report that AOC wrote her bill on, and they reiterated and regurgitated a bunch of talking points amongst themselves. I don't really, I went to nasa.gov. I went to the, oh, geez, Louise, who are these people? They are the UCSUSA, and they're the Union of Concerned Scientists. So I went and I looked at some of the things that they were talking about. They're .org. But I really liked what the Australian Academy of Science had to say about the rapid growth of CO2. They actually came out and said outright that, it's dominated by Asian emissions of fossil fuels. And they also admit that the concentration varies from year to year, and they'll touch on the volcanic activity and the solar sun fluctuations. But when we get to talking about things like the sun and volcanoes and things that are out of man's control, they go down the path of kind of debunking it before they even get into what it is. They don't really describe. I mean, we all should know what solar fluctuations and volcanic eruptions are, but when they're talking about it, they pass it off and they pass the buck as it being negligible. And something that, again, I have to disagree with is I am a Wiccan still, and I believe that Mother Earth is above all, more powerful than man. She could wipe us off the face of the planet if she wants to. She tolerates us being here. No, we're not treating her properly. We could do better cleaning our oceans and recycling on a minute, every person for themselves sort of way, and that would be impactful to the world. But to sit here and tell me that, oh, sun solar fluctuations, they're not that, they're not that common and they're not that powerful. Oh, volcanic eruptions, no, they're not that powerful and they're not that impactful. At that point, I have to ask you, are you underestimating Mother Nature? Do you not see what she does with tornadoes, what she does with hurricanes and, earthquakes and everything. So to sit here and just brush off these things as being negligible, it makes me wonder about why you're actually putting this data into play and why yins are all saying the same things. The earth heats, it cools. Science has shown this. We work in cycles and patterns. I tend to look at the Farmer's Almanac to decide what the weather's going to do or what it could potentially do coming into the next few years. Even just in the short amount of time that I've been on this earth, I have noticed the heating and a cooling happening in patterns and waves. So again, coinciding with my own religious beliefs, with the ebb and flow and the circle of life, I tend to put my science into those types of terms as well, where I'm saying, hey, look, we're heating, we're cooling, we're heating, we're cooling. You have species that are dying out and species that are being born. We really need to pay attention to everything on a secular or circular type of mentality. If you ask me personally, because everything goes around and comes back around again. So CO2 gases are made from a lot of natural different processes as well, as humanoid environmental stressors. So it's not just us spraying our hairspray, and it's not just us burning fossil fuels in production and transportation and things like that. This is where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think, got her cow fart rant from. What type of natural things are there? Well, cows emit CO2. Well, so do decomposing bodies, and so do other things that are dying in our natural environment. So when you level a forest and all the CO2 from the potential plants and things are getting back into, I saw a model on the Australian Academy of Science webpage that actually made a lot more sense than anything I read in the ICG report that the bill was based off of, was that, it was going into the earth and then through the rain cycles, cycle, for lack of a better word, but through the rain cycle, it's coming back around, and again, it's that circular motion. So it goes into the earth, and then it gets evaporated into the air, and that's when it goes into the clouds, and that's when it drops back down to the earth, and it's just kind of going around. So it puts me a little bit more confident in the way that I think, in the way that I'm viewing this bill. So if you disagree, please feel free to re-educate me or leave your comments at the bottom. the science behind all of this just seems to push an agenda to me across the board on the issue, as we're also looking at an instance where the right and the left are agreeing to an extent on what is causing the quote-unquote global warming. Now, all the 80s and 90s kids and parents will remember we've already been supposed to have been dead from global warming. This was supposed to be something that was absolutely imperative. It was going to happen, and it's going to kill us, and it's going to kill us soon. They're preaching the same rhetoric over and over and over again. So we're going back again to, scare tactics, and we go back into division. Some of us are really scared. This is what's going to happen to our world and what's going to be here for our children. And then the other half of us is really trying to take an objective standpoint and say, yeah, I know that there's things happening, but is it as dire as you think it is to pass the legislation that you want to pass? And I think that's just a rational standpoint. And I think being an American, an educated American person, we need to ask these questions. From what I could gather, the bill goes in lockstep with the original report, the environmental hazards, migration, natural land destruction, infrastructure damage, et cetera, et cetera. It states that, the U.S. has been emitting greenhouse gases at a 20% global rate from 2010 to 2014. Now, mind you, it is 2019. You didn't miss 5 years of your life somewhere. They're just basing this on old data, and new data is actually, it's close. I'm not going to lie to you. I think, as I went on to the Union of Concerned Scientists, they put the U.S. at the number 2 total carbon dioxide emissions from fuel combustion. Of course, number 1 was China. China is 9,040.74 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions, and the U.S. is at 4,977.50 million metric tons. So when you pie chart it out, that puts China at a 28% share of the global emissions rate, and it puts the U.S. at 15. So they kind of over exaggerated in the bill when they stated 20%. But what's 5% between friends? Honestly, it's not a big jump, but since they're fact checking Mile High Burgers, I think it's only right to call attention to that. Anyways, if you look at Poland, France, Turkey, Italy, Australia, UK, South Africa, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Iran, Germany, South Korea, Japan, Russia, in India, they're less than 6% emissions alone. But if you put all those countries together, they're at a 35% rate. And then the remaining rest of the world was at a 21% rate. So depending on how you look at the data, yeah, those countries, they're emitting less than us, but what are they really producing to the rest of the world? Now, don't shoot the messenger, because yeah, they are producing goods, don't get me wrong, and it's lovely that they're producing carbon emissions at a much lower rate than we are, but again, size, area, production of these countries, and how much are we contributing to them and their economies. That right there will give you a little insight as to why we're producing carbon emissions at a 15% rate. Further down into the climate change bill, you'll find that climate change is obviously equated to racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic injustices. We're going back to why, how do we equate, again, climate change to racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic injustices? Now we're getting off the beaten trail and really into what I believe that this bill is supposed to resolute to. I know we didn't do them yet. Resolute to, the air quotes. So we're getting into a socialistic type mentality. We don't really care so much that we're going to change the environment. we're going to go ahead and tell you why we're really wanting to change the environment. We think that the environment affects all of these things, and this is going to make everybody's lives better. So when they start equating the reasoning behind why they want this green bill, I think that it really starts putting some light as to why they're shifting all this property around in the federal government. So the bill is talking about how global climate change affects everything, right down to national security. And they want to give people access to nature, and they want to give them they want to make it so that you have access to fair housing, health care, economic security, clean water, healthy food, all these things. It's really starting to look like that's what those other bills were getting at as well. Let's collect and amass all this federal land and all these federal things so that when this bill goes into play, we already have everything, all of our T's are crossed, our I's are dotted, and everything's ready and set to go. You're talking about they're talking about giving people jobs and reconfiguring all these different type of just think of everything that's ran on fossil fuels. You're talking about reconfiguring houses and things to that effect. How are you going to train these people? How are you going to continue to give people access to these lands and give people access to fresh water and things to that effect if there's only one or two people that know how to build this? Let's be real. The technology is not there yet, let alone to have the technology to teach other people how to expand the technology that doesn't exist yet. I think it's absolutely crazy. You know, again, being a Wiccan, I do believe that we are not taking care of our earth. And I do believe that it is the future for our children. But in the same respect, we're also talking about we survive off of things that come from the earth. So these things were already in our environment prior to any type of human existence. And you know, the volcanoes were burning CO2 from inside. If you're talking about oil being in the earth, then I'm sure that it's not hard to equate the fact that there could have been some oil inside a volcano at one point in time that affected the ozone, that affected this greenhouse gas emissions that we're talking about. I'm not 110% sure what you guys all think about this, but I thought it was something interesting to look into. So go online, govtrack.us, look up the Green New Bill, look into the Natural Resources Act, and you tell me what conclusions that you can draw from the pieces of legislation that are being proposed to our Congress. And is this what we need to be focused on right now? Is this going to ensure the safety of our children's future and our future, going along with this socialistic, let the government fix our problems for us type of mentality? This could have a lot to do with the personal search and seizure laws as well. I know that KrisAnne Hall was really talking about personal search and seizure laws on her channel. So if you get a chance to go over there and check out what she had to say about some of the things that are going on in legislation, I encourage you guys to do that as well. So I just wanted to leave you guys with that little bit of food for thought. And if you like what you see, of course, like and subscribe to the videos and leave me the comments. You can follow me on Facebook. It's Georgia Liberty, and I look to producing a little bit more content for you guys in the future. Thank you very much.